Now look, when Royal Enfield announced the Hunter 350 a couple of months back and they sent out the spec sheet and the press release, I was instantly sure it was going to be a massive sales hit. Reason being, it's pretty much based upon the same platform as the Classic 350 and the Meteor 350, and both of those bikes have sold exceptionally well here in the UK. The only thing is, the Classic is pretty old school looking and the Meteor has that sort of cruiser vibe, and so the Hunter, with its more standard upright retro style, I think has broader appeal and therefore the potential to even exceed those bikes in terms of sales volumes. So it all sounds great on paper, but how does it ride when you actually get it out on the road? Well, fortunately, I'm here today at the UK press launch in London to find out. But before we get started, a massive thanks to Flying Ice for sponsoring this video. I like to wear my glasses out on the bike, but regular rigid frames can cause quite a lot of pressure around the temples here, and that can lead to headache, which makes it pretty difficult to concentrate when you're trying to ride. But Flying Ice have absolutely solved that problem with a special material called resilimide. That's allowed them to make their frames super thin at the arms. They're just a millimeter thick there, so they slip right into your helmet super easy. And then they're also mega flexible, so they mold to the inside of your helmet and the side of your head, and that means you barely get any pressure at all. In fact, I barely notice I'm wearing them when I've got my helmet on. Plus, you've got the option of the magnetic sun lenses on these glasses, so that means you don't need to switch between a pair of prescription sunnies and your regular glasses. And they've got loads of styles and colors to suit all tastes, which you can find at the link in the description below, along with a 10% discount code specifically for my viewers. So once again, a massive thanks to Flying Ice for their support. Now look, let's start with the engine on this bike, and it's the basic 349cc oil-cooled single that you'll also find in the Meteor 350 and the Classic 350. And it doesn't make spectacular power output. It's 20 horsepower peak and 27 newton meters of peak torque, and I think that's what I found a little bit underwhelming about the Meteor when I reviewed it last year. The sort of cruiser styling had me expecting it was capable of like longer distances, but when you get up to 50 or 60 miles per hour on the open road, for my taste, it's a little bit underpowered. The Hunter though, they're absolutely marketing it as a city bike. That's why they've launched it here today in London. Occasionally we've hit 40 miles per hour, but most of the riding today has been 20 or 30. And at no point today with that sort of riding have I felt like it was also underpowered. It's got plenty of torque, a nice throttle response. There's bags of character as well. It's just that if you're looking for a city commuter that perhaps you also want to use for the occasional weekend Sunday ride or a couple of nights away, you're probably best off looking at something like the Interceptor 650. That's got a lot of the same vibe and look, and yet it's much more qualified for extra urban riding. I shouldn't completely turn my nose up at the power figures though, because what it does allow them to do is make it super fuel efficient, so 2.65 litres per 100 kilometres, which translates to 80 odd US miles per gallon or over 100 UK miles per gallon. Now the tank's 14 litres, so I think that's a litre less than the Meteor, but still at those official consumption figures, you can get 490 kilometres out of a tank, or just over 300 miles, which is plenty enough, especially in the city where the opportunities to fuel up are much more frequent. So yeah, a nice torquey engine that's really well suited to that city context. Cheap to run, plenty of character, just don't expect too much of it when you do get out of town. And look, they have 100% designed this bike for the city, and you can see that in the way that they've set up the chassis. It's a new frame for a starter, so it's different to the frame on the Meteor and Classic, and it's got a steeper head angle and less trail, so that's been designed to quicken up the handling, which makes it feel more nimble when you're picking your way through dense traffic. Then you've got the wheels, which pretty much have the same effect. So you've got a 17-inch cast wheel front and rear, and so that's a little smaller than the 19-inch front that you'll find on the Classic and Meteor. And again, that just makes it feel more flickable and agile. Plus, it's the lightest of the bunch by a few kilograms, so 181 kilograms curb. Not super light for a bike of this size, but it is really compact and small, so it never really properly gets away from you. And so it always feels totally manageable, no matter what sort of like sticky situations you get yourself into when it comes to filtering. Now look, the suspension is pretty basic. It just about does the job, and I'd say the same for the brakes. They will stop you, but they don't feel particularly powerful, and the tires aren't top notch either. But I think it's those three changes to the rudiments that have made this a much more fun bike to ride in the city than something like the Meteor. As for the ergonomics, well, it's pretty much what you'd expect from a bike of this stature. Nice and low at 790mm in the seat, and so you can easily flat foot it either side. even at my height at about 5'9". The bars are nice and wide and fairly high, so you're looking forward at the traffic, which is great when you're filtering. And then the foot peg position, they've lifted it a little bit versus the Meteor, so you can get a touch more lean on. And of course, they're a little further back because they don't have that sort of cruiser riding position. But again, for me, they're in a nice, comfy position that doesn't feel too cramped. All in all, for most riders, especially those on the slightly shorter side, I think this is going to be a really comfy bike. I'd only say it's if you're getting up to like 6 foot that you might look a little big on it and perhaps feel a touch cramped. Fortunately, there's the Scram 411, which is like a slightly city biased version of the Himalayan, and that's got a bit more substance and roominess, and so that might be a better option. Aside from all that, it's well set up for carrying a passenger because you've got rubbers in the foot pegs to minimize vibrations, heat shields on the exhaust so you don't melt your shoes, a decent size of pillion seat there, but I think the big thing is the proper grab rails. So some retro bikes will have a thin, stretchy handle that doesn't feel that reassuring when you're sat on the back. And so yeah, some proper grab rails as standard that I think actually look all right as well, are definitely a big boost for passenger confidence. Now in terms of tech, it's a very simple bike. I do like the switch gear, they've got a nice design to them, they feel a little bit retro, and also the clock with that analog speedo around the outside and then the digital readout in the middle. But that's pretty much it. I mean, you do have dual channel ABS, but there's no riding modes, no traction control, no phone integrations or anything like that. Personally, I think it's probably appropriate for a bike of this retro genre and also this really aggressive price point. Is perhaps only a little bit of a shame that the one piece of tech that does distinguish the Enfields from a lot of the competition isn't available. So that's the Tripper navigation pod. Essentially it connects to your phone via Bluetooth and gives you little turn-by-turn navigation prompts. Really good. I tested it out on the Meteor and I was pretty impressed with it, but unfortunately owing to the global chip shortage they aren't actually available at the moment. So this bike is compatible. You could conceivably have it fitted later when they do arrive in dealers, but at the moment unfortunately you'll have to make do without. Fortunately there is Beeline Moto, which does pretty much the same thing. It fits any bike and it's really easy to follow. Full transparency, they do sponsor the channel, but I'll leave some links in the description below in case you're interested. Now onto the styling. I think this is one of its core strengths. It really is a great looking bike, especially at this price point. Right up there with the best looking Enfields for me, so the Interceptor 650 and the Continental GT. I think this looks 99% as good, but it's quite a lot more affordable. The only thing I will say is it bears more than a passive resemblance to the Triumph Street Twin. I find it pretty difficult to believe that's a complete coincidence, but if you're not really bothered about the originality of the design, which I don't think many people will be, then you can just appreciate the fact that it is a great looking bike. There are 6 choices of color, so some a little bit more modern and colorful, some a bit more muted, but that's one of the good things about Enfield. They always offer plenty of color choices, and so there should be something for everyone's taste. As for pricing, well, it's just shy of £4 grand, which I think is pretty impressive. There are 2 pricing tiers depending on which color option you go for, but either way, it does look like really good value for money. Thing is though, there isn't really any direct competition for this bike to compare it to. Maybe something like the Husqvarna Svartpillen 401, but that's a lot more modern looking and it's £1 to £2 grand more expensive. Really, the only bike on the horizon that I could see spoiling the party is the baby Bonneville that Triumph are working on in partnership with Bajaj. That looks like it's going to be very similar to this bike, but I'll be extremely surprised if they manage to hit such an aggressive price point. Still, for now, the Hunter has the market to itself, and I think it's a really good choice of like second bike if you're a more experienced rider and you want something affordable and stylish to commute on, or it's a brilliant first bike for anyone new to riding and you want something that's not too intimidating in terms of power, but still really good looking and something you can be proud to own. As always, I'd love to know what you think of it down in the comments below, so do let me know. And if you're new here and you want to see more videos like this, hit subscribe and I'll catch you then.